An escaped convict takes shelter in an abandoned house. There, he encounters spooky ghosts and nefarious secrets. Breathing Fear is a horror-themed adventure game. Your goal is simply to escape the abandoned house in the woods by gathering items. Breathing Fear actually has a set time limit to complete it. You have a flashlight, which requires batteries to operate. When you're in the dark, your heart rate will increase, and once the meter reaches 70, you suffer a heart attack and die. You can scavenge batteries from various appliances around to give you more time. You can't swap batteries anywhere, you need to be in a lit room to do it, and be at 0% battery. It's confusing in your first few attempts, to say the least. On top of darkness increasing your heart rate, there will be environmental spooks. Some of these are randomized and will or won't occur based purely on luck. Finally, there are a few ways to calm yourself down, including looking at lit candles, drinking alcohol, or playing some soothing music. These reduce your heart rate and help counteract the effects of the scares. Once you have an understanding of the core mechanics, it's just a matter of figuring out what the game actually wants you to do. The in-game graphics are terrible, even for low-resolution pixel art. It looks muddy, and it's frequently hard to distinguish what things are. There are some cutscene graphics and they look much better than the in-game art, and it's unfortunate that the in-game art is so much worse than the cutscene graphics. Overall, the quality of the art is quite low. During certain spooks, there will be this awkward noise and a zooming in of the camera. It doesn't usually focus on the right aspect of the scare. Instead, it's a slow, janky pan to seemingly empty areas most of the time. Music exists as a single loop. It's meant to be atmospheric horror music, but as you spend more and more time in the game, it grates on your nerves. The rest of the sound design is appropriate, but it relies too heavily on standard horror tropes like sharp noises to complement scares. Parts of the translation are awkward, and in tandem with the pixel font, it makes things really hard to read. One thing that's really frustrating is that your heartbeat meter goes from 0 to 70. This may seem fine, but it just feels wrong. It feels like it should go to 100. Frequently, you'll die because of thinking you have more buffer than you actually do. There really is no story present. Your character is a convict. We don't know why, we never find out how that's relevant. There are a few interesting tidbits, but nothing gets fleshed out enough to even be considered a fully realized narrative. Lastly, you will need to have a pen and paper, smartphone for taking pictures, or have a really good memory to actually complete Breathing Fear. Breathing Fear is moderately difficult, but it's absolutely for the wrong reasons. First of all, there's no save feature. You have to complete the game in a single go. This should immediately be setting off red flags. It is filled to the brim with trial and error. Puzzle solutions aren't necessarily obtuse. They're actually quite obvious most of the time, but you need to do things in a mind-numbingly specific order. It's almost entirely fetch quest style. You need to look for an object that will trigger you to be able to pick up something else. Then you need to go get it, and then return, use the item, and make a little bit of progress. When you combine this with your ever-increasing heart rate and batteries dying, you are going to spend a lot of time in your first few playthroughs just dying because you couldn't figure things out. After a few attempts and taking notes, you will start to develop a route, which is part of where the pen and paper comes in handy. Then you'll make a little bit of progress every single time, eventually getting deeper into the house and finding little tidbits to make you press just a little bit further. Finally, even if you do everything you need to do in the most efficient order, you will still be killed randomly because of dumb luck. If you get spooked too much, which appears to be totally random chance, your heartbeat will simply be too high and you'll have a heart attack, which forces you to start over. Don't let that 2-hour timecode fool you. That's just for figuring out what you need to do. A lot of time was spent taking notes, routing an optimal path, and doing attempts praying for no spooky jump scares to let you reach the end. The actual time to complete a playthrough was 22 minutes and 45 seconds. The game world is incredibly small. You will spend the majority of that 25 or so minutes in a full playthrough walking back and forth between the same areas simply because you can't pick up the stuff you need until you've triggered something else. Does that hammer look useful? You bet your bottom dollar that it is. You won't be able to pick it up until you've discovered that there's a door that was plastered over in the house. Then suddenly, the hammer becomes available to pick up. Repeat that for every single item in the game. This leads to a massively bloated runtime even for a single playthrough. The amount of backtracking is offensively absurd. There are technically 5 endings. None of the endings are good or satisfying. You also have to repeat the same steps every single time if you want to experience them all, with only slight deviation in how you handle the final minutes. Don't bother going for all of them. Actually, don't even bother going for one of them. At Recommended Playing, games are either ascended to the pantheon of games worthy of your time with a recommendation, or are forced to wallow in the miserable muck of mediocrity with a dismissal. Breathing Fear is terrible. It's an exercise in frustration at the best of times and infuriating at the worst. It has a short length that's extremely bloated by trial and error gameplay and incessant backtracking. The game requires you to figure out and plan out the predetermined route for the sake of efficiency, but even if you execute it near flawlessly, you can still lose due to dumb luck with the randomized scares. Nothing about Breathing Fear stands out for the right reasons. It's a frustrating experience that really will appeal to no one. Breathing Fear gets Recommended Playing's most disgraceful verdict of not recommended. If for whatever reason you're still interested in Breathing Fear, or you own it and got sick of trying to figure out what to do, there's a guide popping up right now in the end cards that will take you through the required steps to reach all the endings. Thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe for more reviews and guides.